Hello, I'm Christian Lehmann. I am a 9-time attendee of the Dickens universe. I currently live in Cleveland, where I teach at Bard High School Early College on the Faculty of Literature. I'm also on the teaching faculty at the Dickens universe, where every year I lead a daily seminar in an appreciation of Dickens's style. I'm very thrilled to be able to meet with you today to talk about, truly, the climax of Barnaby Rudge. You've been through so much, and the center at Newgate prison has been there for so long, and at last we both enter it with the Rudges, but also burn it with Hugh and company. Before we begin, though, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of the way somebody might have handled this book back in the Victorian period. As you've no doubt learned, the installments would come out weekly, usually about 2 chapters per unit. Eventually, at the end of every month, they'd come out in a monthly installment. But Dickens had a really clever idea, which was, in this publication, Master Humphrey's Clock, to come out with full volumes as he was going. This culminated in having 3 volumes of the complete works of Master Humphrey's Clock, which you can tell are 3 like that. However, and this is, I think, where Dickens is really a genius, or whoever packaged the volumes, you also have a special trick. On the front of each volume is a clock, obviously a reference to Master Humphrey, but you see where the minute and hour hand are? They're at the 1. Volume 1. The same goes for Volume 2, and of course, for Volume 3. The other option, though, if you didn't like to have all 3 of these volumes, is you could bind your complete collection so that it was 1 volume, like this. All right, let's get down to brass tacks. This is a series of truly astonishing readings that vary quite a bit in tone and character. For instance, in chapters 57 and 58, we watch Barnaby both perform heroically as he tries to defend the compound and then become arrested and go to jail. It's here that we have the first of many of our mysteries that are going to be laid out and sort of resolved if you've been paying attention. So, if we go to chapter 58, on page 482 and 483, we have an exchange between a man with 1 arm and a man without an arm. And interestingly enough, and here's Barnaby listening here on page 482, the first words that reached his ears were these: "Why, is he brought here then, if he has to be taken away again so soon? Why, where would you have him go? Damn! He's not as safe anywhere as among the king's troops, is he? What would you do with him? Would you hand him over to a pack of cowardly civilians that shake in their shoes till they wear the soles out with trembling at the threats of the ragamuffins he belongs to? That's true enough. True enough. I'll tell you what, I wish, Tom Green, that I was a commissioned instead of a non-commissioned officer, and that I had the command of 2 companies, only 2 companies, of my own regiment. Call me out to stop these riots. Give me the needful authority and half a dozen rounds of ball cartridge." So I won't spoil it for you if you don't remember who these 2 characters might be. One, though, is a sergeant, and the other is somebody that's encountered the sergeant with the filthy mouth before. What I wanted to point out is that one of the characters has a lot of vulgarity, using the word damn and a few other words that Dickens doesn't say, but that he mentions were used, and then another very well-spoken figure. It's often the case in Dickens that if you pay attention to a character who is noble, no matter where that person is born, that person is going to be one of your heroes. So keep your eye out for this 1-armed man. He'll make his appearance several more times. After this week break, we enter the next 2 chapters, which form another weekly section. In these 2, we switch modes away from Barnaby to Hugh, Dennis, and their company. These are really intense chapters, particularly chapter 59, and I want to deal with the material here quite carefully. Chapter 60 we can put aside for the moment. It's where Hugh and everybody else decides they're going to burn jails. But in 59, something really complicated and important happens, because Hugh and Dennis kidnap Dolly and Emma. And at first, it's played for a really problematic effect, because the two of them are leering at one another, gazing at these women and handling them physically. What's important to note here is that while Dickens uses certain language, he's not talking about that specifically. What I mean is he uses a certain language of affection that's hiding what he's actually saying. So if you come with me to page 493 of your volume, which is in chapter 59, we have this phrase that women are inside the carriage, and then we get this paragraph. It was in vain they tried for help. He put his arm around the neck of each and swore to stifle them with kisses if they were not as silent as the grave. Hugh is not swearing that he is going to kiss them. This is an explicit threat of rape. For these two women, both virgins, both of their household, and both already with lovers established in the text, this is one of the most terrifying things Hugh could possibly say. You'll remember earlier Hugh had already encountered one of them in the woods, where he was also physically aggressive. All right? And Dickens points to this. Look at the language he uses. He puts his arm around the neck and swore to stifle them with kisses, right? This is language of death, right? The blocking off of the airway. So I just want to be very careful that you're aware of this. One of the most amazing illustrations we get comes also in this chapter. And look at the ferocity of Dolly there and the sheer kind of wildness of Hugh, the comic legs of Sim, and then Emma. Pay attention to the way in which these characters develop in their captivity, because one will wither a little bit, but the other will flourish. In chapters 61 and 62, we move back to Newgate. In 61, Rudge Sr. is brought to Newgate, and in 62, father and son meet. I don't want to spend a lot of time on these passages. In fact, I'm not going to spend any, because I want to move on to 64 and the climax, what I think is the climax of Barnaby Rudge. In 63, Varden has been taken to go to Newgate and open it up. After all, he made the lock and they think he knows how to do it. But in 64, the band begins to destroy Newgate and light it on fire. So now, a quick aside, this illustration, if you want to know who your heroes are, notice who has clean shaven. Obviously for this video, I am not a hero. The bottom of 533. And here is where we get to the reason I love Dickens, which is at the level of language. The furniture being very dry and rendered most combustible by wax and oil, besides the arts they had used, took fire at once. The flames roared high and fiercely, blackening the prison wall, and twinning up its lofty front like burning serpents. At first, they crowded round the blaze and vented their exultation only in their looks. Notice this colon. This colon is now going to introduce a series of successive clauses that will culminate 20 lines later. Looks, colon. But when it grew hotter and fiercer, dash. When it crackled, leaped, and roared like a great furnace, dash. When it shone upon the opposite houses and lighted up not only the pale and wondering faces at the windows, but the inmost corners of each habitation, dash. When, through the deep red glow, heat and glow, the fire was seen sporting and toying with the door, now clinging to its obdurate surface, now gliding off with fierce inconstancy, and roaring high into the sky, anon returning to fold it in its burning grasp and lure it to its ruin, dash. When it shone and gleamed so brightly that the church clock of St. Sepulchre's, so often pointing to the hour of death, was legible as in broad day, and the vane upon its steeple top glittered in the unwonted light like something new richly jeweled. Dash. When blackened stone and somber brick grew ruddy in the deep reflection, and windows shone like burnished gold, dotting the longest distance, in the fiery vista with their specks of brightness. Dash! When wall and tower and roof and chimney stack seemed drunk, and in the flickering glare appeared to reel and stagger. Dash! When scores of objects never seen before burst out upon the view, and things the most familiar on some new aspect. Dash! Then! When, then. Then the mob began to join the whirl, and with loud yells and shouts and clamor, such as happily is seldom heard, bestirred themselves to feed the fire and keep it at its height. This paragraph Dickens has put all of his literary energies in to try and convey what's actually happening with the burning. The language itself is set afire at the same time that the gate of Newgate is becoming breached. So pay attention to those one-armed men and enjoy the rest of Barnaby Rudge. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see some of you very soon in January at the play and, of course, at Dickens Universe.